Hi everyone, welcome back or welcome to With or No Stuck in a Book with me, Nikki. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and New Year. I hope you were spoiled rotten and Santa was good to everyone and that you were very busy over the festive season. I definitely was. Seeing friends and family. It's my daughter's 16th birthday, so yeah, very busy for us here. But back to normality this week, with back to school and working, etc. So today we're going to be going through the books that I read in December. It's mostly kind of Christmas themed books that I read. I didn't read everything that was in my TBR because, as I've already said, December is a super busy month. But I did get a few read, so we will go through them today. So grab a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, and we'll go through them just now. I'm drinking my tea out of my new book mug that I got for Christmas. But yeah, let's start. So the first book that I read was this little book, which was A Poem for Every Day of Christmas, edited by Ali Ezeri. And yeah, it's basically what it says on the tin. It was a different poem for every day of December right up to Hogmanay. Some of them were very well known, like The Night Before Christmas, Auld Lang Syne, A Christmas Carol, 12 Days of Christmas, and then there was some that I hadn't read before, some funny poems in there, some serious poems, some hymns. So yeah, it was a good little book to just pick up every now and again throughout December and read. And I managed to read all of them. And as I say, it's quite a nice little looking book to quite an aesthetic cover for sitting around the living room or whatever at Christmas time. But yeah, I recommend that, and like kind of the other anthologies that I had. I didn't read the full the full book of the other two anthologies. I'll just dip in to them again next Christmas. But yeah, I enjoyed this. Something a bit different. I don't read poetry very often, so it was nice to read something different. Then next up, I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Obviously that is the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, who is basically a grouch. He's bad-tempered, he's mean, he's a miser. All he cares about is money and accumulating more and more money and never spending any of it and just keeping it all for himself. And the book starts out on Christmas Eve, and he's working away, and he's so mean that he isn't even going to give his workers Christmas Day off of work, but they convince him, and he's not happy about it. His young nephew comes to invite him to dinner, Christmas dinner the next day, and he famously says bah humbug, doesn't want anything to do with Christmas, thinks it's a waste of time. Some charity workers come by asking him to give money to help the poor out at Christmas, and he's like, why do I need to help them out? Why can't they just go to the workhouses? That's what I pay my taxes for. And he's just altogether a mean, miserly guy. And he goes home that night, and even in his own space, in his own home, he doesn't give himself any sort of luxuries. He's even mean to himself. That's how obsessed he is with accumulating money and keeping all this money. He doesn't even light himself a big fire to keep himself warm, or like give himself a big meal. He's just thoroughly miserly. And he is visited by the ghost of his old partner, Marley, who was the same as him in life, and Marley is now in this kind of awful state of purgatory because of the sins that he committed while he was alive, and he's there basically to warn Scrooge not to do the same, to mend his ways before it's too late. And he tells him that he'll be visited by 3 more ghosts. The ghost of Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas yet to come. And they'll show Scrooge the error of his ways. So the next ghost comes and shows him that his Christmases from when he was a boy, and we see how Scrooge had a pretty miserable childhood himself. And then we see Christmas present, and he notices that people are making fun of him. He's not actually liked at all, and like he's the butt of a lot of people's jokes, and that obviously makes him feel bad as well. And then we get Christmas yet to come, and we get the revelation that the Cratchit family, who Bob Cratchit is one of Scrooge's employers, their young son, who is disabled, passes away, and it's a kind of direct cause of the way Scrooge treats his employee, Bob, and the fact that he doesn't pay him enough for like the medical bills and stuff. And we also see that Scrooge himself passes away, and absolutely no one cares, no one mourns him. And he wakes up on Christmas morning, and he's seen the error of his ways. He's a completely changed guy. He goes out and he buys the biggest goose, I think it is, in the butcher shop, and he sends it round to the Cratchits, and he gives Bob Cratchit a wage rise, and from then on he's a very generous and kind man. I hope I'm not spoiling that for anyone there, but I think the story of Scrooge is kind of universally known. There's so many different adaptations of it in film version and TV version that it's kind of impossible not to know the story. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. I have read it before, but this time I really kind of took it in a lot more. The last time I just listened to it on audiobook, and yeah, I would recommend reading this at Christmas, because it's really kind of what Christmas is all about, and a lot of the traditions that we have at Christmas now come from A Christmas Carol and Charles Dickens' other Christmas stories. Charles Dickens is kind of pivotal in the Christmas that we know and love today. Charles Dickens and the kind of Victorian era are what kind of cemented Christmas as it is now in Britain. Next up, I read 2 different versions of The Nutcracker. One is by E.T.A. Hoffmann, which is the original, and then the other one is by Alexandra Dumas, which is obviously a kind of retelling of it. The E.T.A. Hoffmann one is called Nutcracker and Mouse King, and then the Dumas one is called The Tale of the Nutcracker. So I read both of these. What I would say is, if you're getting these 2 stories, maybe try and get a different translation from this one. This is the Penguin Classics one, and it's translated by Joachim Neugroschel. Because I don't think this translation was great, because I listened to a different translation, and the translation that I listened to was better than this version in this book with regards to both stories. So I would maybe pick up a different copy if you're going to do that. But yeah, so I'd never read The Nutcracker before. I've never seen the ballet or anything. I kind of vaguely know the story, but hadn't ever read it or seen it or whatever. So I read both of those. Both are quite different from each other. The E.T.A. Hoffmann one, which was the original one, is quite a dark tale of the young girl who meets the Nutcracker and battles the Mouse King. In that version, the Mouse King has 9 heads, I want to say, 9 heads. He's like a 9-headed kind of monstrous figure. And it's quite dark and stuff. The Alexandra Dumas version is much more for children, like for young children, I would say, and it's much more of a kind of fairy tale vibe. The Mouse King's less monstrous. You've got this kind of Wizard of Oz element to it where she wakes up and it's like, oh, was it all a dream type thing? So I would say I preferred the Alexandra Dumas version, just because it is a bit lighter. That's the one that I would read to younger children. The first one is very dark. But yeah, I did enjoy them both, and next Christmas I might try and watch a version of it, the ballet or whatever, because as I say, I've not seen it. But yeah, again, another kind of Christmas staple, so I'm glad I read it. And I would encourage you to give it a go, like around the Christmas season, because it does give those Christmas vibes. And then I read this little novella, which is called The Christmas Guest, and that's by Peter Swanson. This is a little thriller, Christmas thriller, and it's set in the 80s, and it's about a student, an American student who is studying in England, and she gets invited back to her classmates' kind of big manor house in the country for Christmas, and she's basically kind of falls for the brother of her classmate while she's there, and she's kind of wanting to get together with him, but there's this rumor going around that he may have murdered this girl the year before, but she's like, no, he could never have done that, and his sister's obviously like, well, obviously it wasn't him, like he can be questionable, he can be a bit weird and like but he wouldn't have killed anyone, but there's that little kind of doubt, and then there's a big twist, so I don't want to say too much more about it because it kind of really all hangs on that like kind of major plot twist that happens about 2/3 of the way through. But yeah, as I said, it's like a little thin novella. It is literally about 130 pages long. So great for the busy month of December, where you can just pick it up and read it in an afternoon, or you can read it over a couple of days while you're doing all those other things that you need to get done in December. Next up, I have So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. Claire Keegan is an amazing writer. Like I would read her shopping list. She is an Irish writer. She wrote what's it called? The Cillian Murphy film, Small Things Like These. She wrote that, and it's a masterpiece. And this one is it's even shorter than Small Things Like These. It's literally only about 50 pages long. So again, great for a busy month. And it's about this man living in Dublin, and he is finishing work for a long weekend, and it starts off with him going home from work, on the bus, and he speaks to this woman, and it's kind of a little bit rude to her, but that kind of triggers him going home and thinking back to when he met another woman who he ended up going out with, falling in love with, and proposing to. And it's all about how he thinks about how he's been rude to, how he's treated that first woman on the bus, and it gets him thinking back to this woman that he was in love with, and how his behaviour, like, had he behaved differently towards her, would things have turned out differently? So it's all about those, like, little moments, like, had I just done something different, would my life be the way it is right now? And as I say, it's like 50 pages. Every single word and sentence in it is so good. Like I've read 3 or 4 Claire Keegan books. They're all very short, but they're all so good. I recommended small things like these for my winter reads recommendation videos, because it is set around Christmas, but this one is set more kind of around the summer time. But yeah, it's good for, I just think in December, like, having little short reads are good because it's such a busy month. But yeah, I would thoroughly recommend any Claire Keegan at all. I also read the Staying Relevant book by Sam Thompson and Pete Wicks. This is basically off the back of their podcast, and it's basically about how they both started out in reality TV, how they kind of became famous. They say themselves they might not actually be famous. Like, what is being famous? Like, how well known do you have to be considered famous? But how they became known on, like, reality TV and then other shows and stuff, how they came together, how they met each other, and then how they are staying well known and staying relevant. Obviously, that's what their podcast is all about. So it's structured as a kind of conversation between the two of them all throughout. So it's just like you're reading dialogue between the two of them. Some other people come in at some points, like Yuvita from Strictly, Pippa, their producer and stuff, all come into it at some point. But yeah, quite funny. I like Sam and Pete, so I enjoyed it. If you don't like them, you probably won't like it. You don't pick it up, but you do you. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It was quite funny, quite light, easy read. That's that one. And then finally, this is the reason I didn't read more in December and I needed shorter books, is because the last book that I read was Bleak House by Charles Dickens, which is nearly 1,000 pages long. Bleak House is about, the main premise is about the case of Jarndyce and Jarndyce, which is an inheritance case. And in Victorian times, any disputed inheritance cases went to the Court of Chancery, and the Court of Chancery was notorious for dragging these cases out. It would drag them out so long that it would eat up all the money within that inheritance. So you had all these people that were unable to claim their inheritance, live in the house that they've been left. They're living in poverty sometimes while they're waiting for these cases to be settled, and these lawyers and judges are dragging the case out, often deliberately, because they're getting paid. They don't care, and they'll do that for years and years and years and years until all the money's gone. Like that, so you could have been set to inherit thousands and thousands of pounds, and then it's all just eaten up by lawyers' fees and court fees and stuff because they just keep dragging it out. And it was one of the things in the Victorian times, and in particularly in Charles Dickens' time, that people were crying out to be reformed. So that's the kind of premise at the centre of this, and we've got Esther, who is, it starts off with her being a young girl, and she is being looked after by someone who she thinks is her godmother. She is illegitimate, and her childhood isn't happy. Her godmother's quite horrible to her. She's quite like, she doesn't have any love or anything in her life when she's a young girl, apart from her doll, and it's quite sad and heartbreaking at times. And then her aunt passes away, and she goes to be a companion to Eva, and Eva is one of the wards of court in this Jarndyce case, and the other one is Richard. So she's with them, and the two of them are going to be married. But Richard becomes consumed by this case, even though he's warned by so many people, and there's warning signs in other characters that you shouldn't get too invested in this case because no good's going to come of it. But he can't help himself. He becomes quite obsessed. He can't think of anything else. He's wasting what little money he has on trying to get this case solved. And it's just all about that. There's so many different characters in this though, but they're all kind of pulled, like it all kind of centres around this one court case. There's too many to go into, but it is very long, but I did enjoy it. There's some bits that I enjoyed more than others. It goes between a kind of omniscient narrator and Esther's narrative, and it flips between the two. I really preferred Esther's narrative chapters to the other ones, just because they were a bit more personal. Sometimes the other chapters could be quite drawn out, but I did enjoy it. It took a long time to read, but yeah. If you haven't read any other Charles Dickens, I maybe wouldn't start with this one. I'd maybe start with something like Great Expectations or something a bit smaller, and a bit more easy to read. If you are going to read this, I thoroughly recommend also listening to the Miriam Margolyes audio version of it at the same time, because she is insane at narrating this book. The amount of different character voices she done, and she done them all so well that I was just like blown away by it. Like the amount of different voices that she could do. Like even like the men's voices she done so well, and I think she is a big Charles Dickens fan in real life. If I remember rightly, I think he's one of her favourite authors. I remember reading an interview in a history magazine where he was kind of her history hero. So that really helps if you're struggling to read it. That audio version is just out of this world. But yeah, there is a lot of kind of tough stuff to read in here, especially like with people who are living in the slums, like which they call the Tom and Loans in this book. Joe the Sweeper, Jenny and her baby. There's some kind of tough scenes. We also have at the other end of the spectrum, we've got the kind of more the richer people, the aristocracy. So we've got certain Lady Deadlock, who they're basically like, why should we reform anything? Because it works for us. Like, we're fine. So like, why would we upset the status quo? And it's kind of about that, having that social conscience that like, even though you're doing okay, it doesn't mean everybody else is, and sometimes we should be looking to help others, and sharing our fortune with those less fortunate. As you probably know, Dickens was a massive advocate for reform and social improvement in the world. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this. But as I say, if you haven't read any Dickens before, maybe try something else first. But this is a lot of people's favourite Dickens, and it's also the one that a lot of people think is his best work. And off the back of this book, there was a big outcry for reform, and I believe the Court of Chancery did get abolished. So it does show you the power of what literature and a book can do. But yeah, so that was the final book I finished in December. I read it for book club. We had a good discussion about it. Learned a lot of kind of history around the book and stuff. I did know quite a lot about the Victorian era beforehand, but I had never heard of the Court of Chancery, so that was interesting to find out about that. And yeah, as I say, I would recommend it if you're a fan of classic literature. Yeah, so that was the final book that I read in December, and yeah, so it was a good reading month. Quite a lot of like little short books, but that's okay. Sometimes we need some little short reads. My next video up will be my January TBR, and I also have some other videos planned for January. I've got some more reviews from my 40 before 40. I have a video planned for 26 books that I want to read in 2026. I want to show you some of the classics that I want to read this year and things like that. So yeah, I've got a lot planned. I do want to be a bit more organised with videos this year. So yeah, I have been sitting down and trying to make a plan, and I will try to stick to that. But yeah, so thank you for listening today. I hope there was something there that you might want to read in the future or next Christmas season. And for now, goodbye and thank